Aside from the financial rewards that come with fame, no currency is more important in hip-hop than momentum. In the immortal words of Dr. Dre to his protege on To Pimp a Butterfly's Wesley's theory, this inability to consolidate your buzz after a big hit is something that artists must be mindful of. Remember, anybody can get it, he insisted. The hard part is keeping it. Whether through setting an unsustainable standard for themselves, losing focus, or just getting complacent, there are plenty of artists that went through periods in which they were flourishing, only for a lapse in judgment, a rushed project, or a change in tact to come along and disrupt their winning streak. With that in mind, here are 10 artists that had their run of form impeded by one or more projects that declined in quality. At number 10, we got Nelly. At one stage, you physically couldn't consider the commercial landscape of hip-hop without taking St. Louis' finest, Nelly, into account. During an era where the cultural heat map was largely in favor of MCs from the East, West, and South, the St. Lunatics leader clawed some of the power back for the Midwest and became a fully fledged megastar in the process. Coming of age during the era where rappers could finally gain the sort of market share that had previously been reserved for rock and pop stars. Nelly's 2000 debut album Country Grammar introduced a new swagger to the game and went diamond in the process. As Nellyville, Sweat and Suit, and worldwide smash singles such as Hot in Here, the Kelly Rowland duet of Dilemma, and Shake Your Tail Feather, all emulating its success, the wheels were well and truly off by the arrival of 2010's 5.0, and rather than simply not regaining his momentum, he'd go from selling 10 million units to moving 23,000 units of 2013's MO and having trouble with the IRS to boot. At number 9, we got Chance the Rapper from 2012 to 2019, about 7 years. Sometimes the weight of expectation can just be too much to bear. 8 years since his iconic introduction to the game with the Project 10 Day, Chance the Rapper had entered into uncharted territory for a mainstream hip-hop artist. Building a legacy solely off independent mixtapes and refusing to engage with the industry's traditional infrastructure, the Chicagoan had become a superstar without officially releasing a debut album. Leaping into the stratosphere with the eternally fresh acid rap and the Apple Music hosted coloring book, Chano really felt like a trailblazer that had earned every iota of success that he'd achieved. Yet, as accusations of corniness began to amass around his upbeat public persona, the pressure began to mount for him to deliver on his debut album. Sadly, as history has taught us, he didn't stick the landing. The starting pistol for memes, widespread mockery and cancellation of his tour, the woeful misstep of the big day has come to represent the sharpest decline after a storied run of form that hip-hop has ever witnessed. At number 8, we got Lil Wayne from 2006 to 2010, 4 years. At a time when Cash Money was floundering, no one expected that it'd be a teenage member of the Hot Boys who'd take the baton and run with it. Yet, as he began to exceed expectations and hone his trademark drawl on 1999's The Block is Hot, Lil Wayne morphed into another beast entirely. As the Wheezy we all came to know and love crash-landed on Earth, this self-professed Martian's prime began in earnest with the first edition of the Carter in 2004. Coming into his own at the height of the Gangsta Grills era, Tunechi's rise was aided by the parallel run that he'd fashioned for himself as a mixtape specialist. Across the Drought and Dedication series and his main canon of Carter albums, Wayne had 3 of the most trusted brands in hip-hop, delivering unmistakable quality at every turn. Then, somewhere around 2010, Wayne's status as the best rapper alive showed visible cracks. From the rap-rock hybrid of Rebirth to a lackluster Carter 4, Wayne found it increasingly difficult to regain his footing. Although there's been sparks of greatness on the Carter 5, Free Weezy album, and Funeral, claiming that Wayne still holds the same stamp of consistency as he once did in the golden era is an exercise in self-deception. At number 7, we got 50 Cent from 2002 to 2007, 5 years. For those who didn't experience it firsthand, it could be easy to assume that 50 Cent's assault on hip-hop began on his shady Aftermath promoted debut, Get Rich or Die Tryin'. Although this 2003 record is a verified classic, the G-Unit General had already held the game for ransom a year earlier on classic mixtapes, such as 50 Cent Is the Future and G-Unit's No Mercy, No Fear. From there, 50 fashioned himself an empire that made the thuggery at his time on the streets of Southside Queens into an international commodity. Amid fashion lines and video games, it seemed as though there was no ceiling on his success as his sophomore project The Massacre soon followed. Skyrocketing to the top of the charts with ease, his success and the hand that he'd had in the careers of others, ranging from loyal soldiers such as Lloyd Banks and Young Buck to the West Coast edition that was The Game, made him incredibly confident as he went into his third official release with Curtis. Squaring off in a chart battle with Kanye West that he felt predestined to win, it turned out that complacency became 50's worst enemy as the album failed to meet the criteria and critical commercial expectations. After reneging on his promise to quit music if Kanye bested him, 50 continued to diversify his portfolio and reduce rapping to a side hustle. Now, he's just as renowned as a controversial public figure as he is an MC, leaving one of the early 2000s titans with a legacy that greatly differs from what we'd once anticipated. At number 6, we got Eminem from 1999 to 2004, 5 years. Heralded as a return to form, Shady's 2020 effort Music to Be Murdered By has been the recipient of no shortage of praise. Said to recapture the volatile spirit of Eminem of years gone by, retreading that Take No Prisoner style has proven enough to send his fans into hysterics once more. Undeniably, one of the finest to ever pick up a mic, Eminem's initial run of projects was nothing short of spellbinding. But after the renowned and middle-class panic that followed the Slim Shady LP, the Marshall Mathers LP, and 2002's The Eminem Show wore off, the scales began to tip too far towards the less compelling aspects of his music. Released in 2004, Encore represented the first moment that Marshall Mathers had teetered anywhere near falling off. Where the shock value and lightning fast bar work had once electrified fans, they now began to seem a little old hat. Teamed with an over-reliance on accents and juvenile comedy, it marked the beginning of a downturn in fortunes that, depending on who you ask, he's yet to recover from. At number 5, we got Jay-Z from 1997 to 2001. They say they never really miss you till you dead or you gone, so on that note, I'm leaving after this song. Extracted from the autobiographical December 4th, from what was once billed as his final album, this touching standout from 2003's The Black Album stands as one of the biggest self-fulfilling prophecies in hip-hop history. When Hov re-emerged 4 years later with Kingdom Come, it'd be a lie to say there wasn't a palpable sense of excitement around what Hov would sound like after a spell away from the front lines. Or at least that was the case until the album surfaced and quickly became his weakest body of work since the commercially minded In My Lifetime Volume 1. A reoccurring issue ever since he came back to the game is not that Jay is bad or has fallen from the stature of a fully fledged GOAT contender. The problem is, in a nutshell, it's that the music simply doesn't have the vitality that it used to. Although the grown man music of 444 saw Hov rhyming from a renewed perspective, the deeply confessional nature of the project brings to mind another quote from his initial Swang song. What more can I say? At number 4, we got Drake, 2009 to 2016, 7 years. From Master to Apprentice. Granted, Drake remains a cultural powerhouse like few we've ever known, but when you think about it, when was the last time that you enjoyed a project in its entirety as opposed to select smash singles? By remaining in pole position on the charts, Toronto's Six God has pulled a meticulous piece of sleight of hand that has masked what's been a decidedly rocky patch when it comes to his albums. From Thank Me Later to the emotionally fragile masterpiece of Take Care, in 2013's Nothing Was the Same, there was a time when a full-length Drake project was greeted with excitement. Now, the concept of a double album such as Scorpion fills fans with emotions ranging from skepticism to all-out dread. If you're looking for a peak that he's since plummeted off of, look no further than If You're Reading This, It's Too Late. Despite recently turning 5, the surprise project has aged with an unquelled grace, standing as his last cohesive body of work, and for all that it contains 17 tracks, it doesn't feel bloated in the same vein as his later works. Although production at the OVO Hit Factory has continued unimpeded, rerouting some of that attention to crafting a rewarding album experience wouldn't go amiss. At number 3, we got Kanye West, 2003 to 2010, 7 years. Now, no one's accusing Ye of falling off. In fact, his ability to take the reins of music or footwear culture wherever he desires is unrivaled to this day. That being said, it'd be dishonest not to acknowledge that the perception of Kanye's music has greatly shifted in recent years. While Dame Dash infamously contemplated throwing Cam on every track to save the album, Ye's debut record, The College Dropout, is now universally lauded as a pillar of classic hip-hop that's went on to influence everyone from J.Cole to Logic, Chance the Rapper, and Drake. Across late registration, graduation, and the mournful year 0 for auto-tune-infused hip-hop that is 808s and heartbreak, Kanye continued to rack up unreserved praise from critics and fans alike that had come to hail him as the preeminent force in the game. In the wake of storming onto the VMA stage and belittling Taylor Swift, the court of public opinion began to turn on a man that even the then president labeled a jackass without hesitation. Yet, with his back against the wall, Kanye pulled out a decadent masterpiece that painted his sordid lifestyle in an uncensored light on 2010's My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. Widely recognized as his high watermark, what's less publicized is that it was the moment that the universal acclaim that surrounded him stopped until the Cudi-assisted Kids See Ghosts 8 years later. At number 2, we got DMX, 1998 to 2006, 8 years. Emerging from the bowels of New York's battle rap scene with an unmatched intensity, Earl Simmons, better known as DMX, quickly began to resemble the total package. The antidote to the shiny suit era as we knew it, X removed the glossy sheen that had began to coat hip-hop and injected a much-needed layer of griminess and hard-hitting rhymes. From the 1999's It's Dark and Hell is Hot onwards, X would go on in an unmatched run, making history as the first rapper to have 5 albums debut at number 1 on the Billboard charts. Yet, as fate would have it, the very darkness that he'd waged an eternal war on wax began to sink its claws deeper. And by the time that 2006's Year of the Dog again was released, X was a shadow of his former self. Haunted by substance issues and constant upheaval in his personal life, those who remember the glory days of the Rough Riders Kingpin can only hope that his new deal with Def Jam will give him a chance to tap back into the authentic and unfiltered style that had once made him a household name. And at number 1, we got a tie. So it's between Kendrick Lamar and J.Cole, 2011 to 2017, and 2011 to 2018, respectively. They say that familiarity can breed contempt, but in the case of both Carolina and Compton's finest, getting accustomed to greatness has led their audiences to always expect more and more. The two elite spitters of their era, when it comes to the trade-off of skill and major label appeal, both J. Cole and Kendrick Lamar have had to constantly grapple with the weight of expectation throughout their decorated careers. Both perched under the learning trees of icons in the shape of Jay-Z and Dre respectively, the two have set a consistently high bar across records such as Section 80, Born Sinner, To Pimp a Butterfly, 2014 Forest Hills Drive, and the modern masterpiece in storytelling that was K-Dot's Good Kid, Mad City. Yet, when they released their latest albums in 2017 and 2018 respectively, both the conceptually loose Damn and the Dreamville Captain's KOD were divisive in nature. Although the Pulitzer win would edge Kendrick's third studio project ahead of Cole, it still felt as though TDE's biggest export had received this prestigious award for the wrong project. Both fared well commercially and to a reasonable extent critically, yet the cultural impact of both had dampened from previous efforts. stumbling blocks that took both men from immortal to vulnerable, 2020 is shaping up to be a pivotal year for both future legends. This has been a Hip Hop Madness original. Make sure to stay tuned and stay up to date with everything we got going on by hitting that subscribe button and notification bell. Oh, and don't forget to follow us on Instagram at HipHopMadness and join the movement.